Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Welcome to Health Oddities, episode 60. Thanks for listening. If you haven't liked and subscribed, then please do. James isn't here. James is away assisting on a certification. So it's just me and Peter hosting today's podcast. If you've not listened to some of the recent ones, please do. Go back and listen to our back catalogue. We've got some great guests that we've had. Phil Maffetone being a highlight recently. But Peter, how are you?
Better than you by the sounds of it, mate.
Well, what no one knows is that this is about the 15th take I've done the intro.
We record the intros in one go and we just get it all done, and then we're like, right, that's done, bag it up, and Paul's having a bit of a day, I think, but never mind, you know.
Well,
it happens to us all, mate.
James usually does them, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, yeah, James has got it down to a fine art these days, hasn't he? But never mind, you know.
He does, yes.
He'll be back. He'll be back next week.
The amateurs are taking over. Not to insult
Also, I want to say thank you to you guys, the listeners, because while we record this, it's the last day in September while we record this. And so we're in podcast land at the minute because it's obviously October now, but it's the last day in September. And we are 50 listeners away from a milestone. So, yeah, I would say get listening now, but it's pointless because we're in the future. But you know what I mean? Hopefully we'll get there.
Well, I think it's like computing power. If every month we can get people to double.
Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah.
So man, you guys are leaving me hanging there. Did you say it's a milestone, but didn't say what it is?
No, of course not. No, we're not going to do that. But we're 50 listeners away from increasing our listenership from the previous record month by 25%, which is quite a lot.
Great, congrats on that.
We're trying to work out the maths on this now. We're 25% below where we were.
So we had 4 listeners and we're almost at 5.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, hello, Mum. So anyway, you're well then, Peter. Good.
I am. Yes. Thank you very much. Let's get going.
There you go. Get going. So today I've got Blly Hofacker, who's the fitness money coach and also runs the Total Body Studios over in New York State. And I know Blly for probably the last 4 or 5 months when I've actually been working with him with some coaching on my business and how to run it better and how to make the most of what I've got basically and try and think about the future. And I originally approached Blly mainly because he was part of a network that I was part of, but also I kind of found out a bit about his story, and his story is really interesting. How he turned his business around, his life around, and how he made some difficult decisions in times when most of us would probably feel like we're about to crack under the pressure, and many people kind of keep going down the road in the wrong direction. And Blly managed to pick himself up and has a wealth of experience, not only in the fitness industry, guiding clients to weight loss, strength gains, and other areas of their wellness, but also other fitness professionals to run better, more financially stable businesses. Which is obviously everyone's goal. And what it got me thinking about was the effect on our wellness that finance has and how we pick ourselves up from difficult situations and turn them into massive pluses in our lives. So, Blly, thanks for your time and thanks for coming on.
No, I'm excited to be here, and I appreciate how you opened up because it's powerful. The idea of getting our financial house in order and what that can do for our health, fitness, and our entire lives.
And what I forgot to add actually is, Blly, you've got your own podcast as well, which discusses some of these subjects in much more detail. And that's something definitely worth listening to. Even if you're not a fitness professional, sometimes it's just going through that process of how do you have practical applications of how do you make your life better by organizing some of the things that we don't want to attend to. I mean, health is one of those things that for many people, for me, and probably not for Peter or for you, Blly, health comes quite easy in the sense that we really love it. I know that Blly, you're into jiu-jitsu as well as strength training, and so we're going to pursue all those things with great enthusiasm. And a lot of people just don't want to train; they don't want to do those things, and because they're hard. And if as a business owner myself, pursuing financial wellness is a bit that you want, but you don't always enjoy going through, and particularly when you're really struggling, which many people will have done through the COVID epidemic. so many people, whether it's people who are employed, who've lost their jobs or gone on to furlough, or small businesses that have really been affected, many people are trying to dig themselves out of holes that are not necessarily created by their own decisions, but certainly something that they can empower themselves to get out of. So Blly, do you mind just giving us a bit of background on how I know you and on where you come from and why the listener might be interested in your story?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like the start of, I'm not going to go all the way back. I mean, I can talk about childhood and stuff like that, but where the financial journey started was around 11 years ago. I thought I was doing really well. And you hit on that point when you said how, you, Peter, and I, we don't mind working out. Maybe we like working out. We like challenging ourselves, and that's not our clients. Our clients, they don't like it, and they need the accountability, and they're just coming with a different mindset. And it's really interesting how you can be so strong in one area and then to be so weak in another area. And I had a lot of a lack of awareness, because I had done some really good things. I had accomplished great things with my fitness. I had got a lot of good things going for me. I was married to my wife. We're still married now. Now we're married 13 years, and we're getting ready to start a family. I'm doing what I loved. I'm following my passion. I'm training people, helping them improve their lives. And I thought I was doing well. And then one day I was actually getting ready for work. It was a Monday morning. It was around 7:30, and I heard a knock on the door. I opened the door, and to my surprise, there's this big muscle-bound dude standing on my porch. He's got tattoos all over his face. He's got a thick goatee, and I look past him, and I see my brand new white, not Maserati, but my brand new white Honda Accord hooked up to his tow truck. My car was being repossessed. And that was like a real slap in the face because I had no idea it was coming. You would think, and I would even think looking back, I don't even know who that guy was. Who was that guy that had his car repossessed and had no clue? That was the furthest thought from my mind. I had no idea that was a thing. I didn't think I was anywhere near that. So that was like a real wake up call. So that's where the journey started. And that led to me doing some digging. It was painful. I don't want to skip past that. It was very difficult, very painful. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. Here I am, this young married guy getting ready to start a family, and I can't even keep my car. So it was really embarrassing. There was a lot of emotional and mental barriers I had to work through. But the bottom line was I dug into the numbers, which is something I teach people to do. It's uncanny how many similarities there are to, I know it's a fitness podcast, right? There are so many similarities to fitness and finance. And one of those is, I bet you, you guys, and if there's any fitness pros listening, or if you've ever been to a good fitness pro, they've done some kind of assessment. I'll give a shout out to your episode. I listened to the one with Stuart McGill, and he talked a whole bunch about that, about how, assessments are lacking nowadays. And that's the main thing. You can't come up with a solution if you don't know what you're dealing with. And that's the case with finances. A lot of us, myself included, I didn't know where I was. And this might sound completely scary, and at one level it was, but I found that my wife and I were over $130,000 in non-mortgage debt at that point. And that sounds really scary. It's scary for me to say it. But the flip side was, there was something about it that was kind of refreshing, because I finally knew where I stood rather than just ignoring it for so long, that once I saw it in front of me on paper, it wasn't fun to look at, but there was something really that felt really good about knowing where I was at. And now I had to just make a decision. And there's another similarity with fitness and finance, is that, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about your fitness journey, maybe it's getting started, or maybe it's getting to the next level, there has to be a decision. It's so interesting, the power of a decision. It's like snapping a finger. You can decide right now, I'm going to change. It's not going to be easy. There is a major uphill battle ahead, but I'm going to be a different person today than I was yesterday. And I made that decision. And that was people ask me, like, how'd you do it? That's the only thing that really matters, is that I decided. I was talking to a guy yesterday, I'm going to pause, let you guys interject. But I was talking to a guy yesterday who I'm going to have on my podcast. He's got a really successful business. He's expanding, opening up multiple locations. And I heard such conviction in his voice. He said, we're going to open up our next one at this point, and then the one after that at this point. Because I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen beyond that, but that is definitely going to happen. And I'll tell you, just from that one conversation, that will happen. It's because he decided it was going to happen. And it's the same thing here. So that's how it started, just to answer your question. And I'm excited to be on your podcast and share my message, and hopefully just make a positive difference in those that are listening. And Paul, I'm really proud to be able to work with you. I love working with you, and I'm excited about that as well.
So I've got a quick question, right? Because I mean, people get into this situation quite easily, and there can be loads of analogies between finance and fitness and family and all of that. We spoke about this before we started recording. It all fits together. You can't be happy in one. You can't be wholly happy in one without having some happiness in the others, right? And we've spoke about this before, like it being like a graphic equalizer. You know, you turn the bass all the way up and then you can't hear it properly, or you turn the bass down, the treble all the way, and all of that. There's loads of different analogies we can talk about with that. But so you were £130,000 in debt, and you say you didn't know that. You just didn't know the number. You knew you were in debt, though, right? You must have. Were you just, because people do this with their fitness as well, and then eventually, 20 years down the line, they'll go, "What? How have I ended up being this person?" And you know exactly how you've ended up being that person. You've just ignored it. You've just put it in a box somewhere. And the funny thing is, if you're watching on video, I'm pointing over there, going, "Put it in a box." You've put it in a box in your head. It's somewhere, you know it's there. You're just lying to yourself, right? So did that happen? And this has happened within, it's not just you as well. It was you and your wife, and you were going to start a family. So like somebody must have known somewhere.
It was so funny because I remember being so judgmental about people. And I remember seeing people that are 100 pounds overweight and saying, like, how could you get to be that overweight and not even realize what's going on? And I completely, it's like, there's a part in the Bible that talks about taking the plank out of your own eye before judging somebody else. And that's exactly what I was doing. And you hit it right on the head. I was just completely ignored it. I swept my problems under the rug. And when we sweep our problems when we sweep anything under the rug, we end up with is a pile of garbage. And that's exactly what happened to me. And to kind of answer your question about, are you aware and can you have this like sort of like happiness, for lack of a better word, in other areas? I think it's very short term. And it's almost like you're fooling yourself. Like you can think you are. And that's kind of what I did because I just ignored it and I focused on the other areas. And just to really paint how bad it was. So you guys, we talked about jiu-jitsu a little bit, and I know you guys have had some other jiu-jitsu practitioners on, but there's a guy, world renowned, you probably have heard of him, or if not, the listeners have, John Danaher. He's a world-class jiu-jitsu coach. He's coaches all the best jiu-jitsu guys. And I've known him for many years. And I was doing private lessons with John during that time. And that just showed me, and trust me, those lessons were not cheap. He's like quite literally the best coach in the world in Manhattan, which is arguably the most expensive place in the world. And I'm doing private lessons with him like twice a week. So that's where I was. I was like, I had no business spending that kind of money when I was in that kind of debt. So yeah, that was just to illustrate how far off of reality I was.
It's funny because you can, what you just said there as well. And this is in a book I read. I can't remember the name. The name will come to me in a minute. But it's when you see something in someone else and it annoys you. Yeah. So you're like, you annoy me, and you need that person around you because they annoy you. And what they're doing is showing you exactly what's in you that you're not happy with. So you're like, you're overweight and you can't look after yourself, and you were doing exactly the same with your finances. It just doesn't show on your body. But it's the same thing, and it's the same principle. And then so you judge people like that until you sort it out within yourself, and then you're like, oh well, you like that, and that's fine. If you want to be like that, be like that. Because I used to be, and I'm not anymore. I can't remember the name of the book. It was by Debbie Ford. I think it's It's either Dark Side of the Light Chasers or something like that. And that's a good recommendation for people actually for a like a mindset book. But yeah, so yeah, that's interesting that. So how did you begin to, I mean, obviously your car got repossessed and what have you. So what happened then? Was it like an instant change in your head? And did you instantly start to say, right, I'm going to do this sort of stuff? Or was it kind of because we had David Keown on the other day and he said he got told by the doctor he was ill and stuff like that. So he went and bought a pair of running trainers and started running. And it all started from there. And then he got fitter and became a kettlebell world champion and all that sort of stuff. So like, it was just that very small start. So what did you do next?
Yeah, so I have a lot of weaknesses, but are there any strengths that I have? One of them is, and I've been this way for a really long time. I remember even somebody else telling me when I was younger, is like when you set your mind to something, you're going for it, you're all in, and you're gonna do it. So that was like the biggest key that I shared. So I would say from a mindset standpoint, it was sort of like a switch, and I decided that I didn't know exactly where I'd end up. And I've ended up now in a better position than I even thought I would, which is another interesting point, that we don't always know where the journey is going to bring us. And I don't think we have to worry about it. You know, I just thought if I could ever get out of this debt, it'd be a miracle. And so, you know, kind of spoiler, was 5 years later, we cleared off every dollar of that debt. I remember, you know, paying that last payment. We didn't know exactly how long it would take. There were some things that kind of pushed us along further, whether it was extra income or things that held us back a little bit, you know, different emergencies that would come up over the course of time. Another parallel to fitness is that it's not a straight line up, right? Nobody just continues to get better and better and better and better with anything, right? Anything. There's no such thing. You know, we've all seen those pictures on Facebook. You know, it's like a zigzag, and there's ups and downs, and it's a matter of never giving up. Winston Churchill, right? Never give in, never, never, never. And it applies there as well as your fitness.
So, I mean, thing is, a lot of people, when you talked about like, oh, I've got to, you know, when I put my mind to it, I can do it and I'm all in. A lot of people sit down in front of us and they say they're all or nothing. I'm sure you get it when you're interviewing clients before they join. I'm all or nothing. I just I just want to be all in. What stopped you being all or nothing? Because you could have just done this for 6 months, not seen the result you want. So you could have been like, oh, I'm going to look after my finances. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And then all of a sudden you see that actually reality it was a 5-year journey, which is probably what most people's fitness journey is going to be like. You know, if you've got 50 kilos to lose, you're probably not going to lose it in 3 months. You're probably going to take much longer. So what kept you on track and stopped you falling into all or nothing? You know?
I think for me, and I hope this helps, and I hope it doesn't hurt anybody who's not. This was just my story, and everybody's story is different. But for me, what I really did was I just looked out into the future, and I had one thing on my side. It was my age. I wasn't super young, but I knew I had time. And I just had that thought of this time is going to pass either way. And I could cry telling you this, but I just thought about my future, and I thought about children, and I thought about the difference that things would make if I stayed on the same path. I mean, I don't even know where I would be. Rock bottom sucks, but sometimes it's the best thing that could happen because there's nowhere else to go but up. And I find it's some of the most challenging cases are when they don't have enough pain, and it could be with fitness or with finances or with relationships. It could be a marriage. My marriage, it's okay. It's not great. It's not so bad. We're not running for a divorce, but it's just kind of blah. And that's sometimes a hard place to be because there's not that real, slap in the face or that real wake up call. So I think some of those things are actually what helped me, even though they were very, very painful. Was I can't get any worse. So I can only move forward, and thinking about the future and thinking about that time was going to pass either way. I mean, let's look at that. Like, whatever the time period is, whether it's the pandemic, this time, and I share this in my coaching, even like, as Paul knows, it's what we do now. Like when the pandemic hit, there was a couple of different reactions, right? One is to get completely scared, throw a cover over your head, never leave your house, and just kind of, hopefully try to wait it out, right? Or there's like, let's focus on what we can control. There's a lot of things that we can't control. We can't control the government. We can't control, the illness. We can't control some of the things with the economy and business, but what can we control? And that's the route that I chose to take. And I wasn't perfect because I also had some discouragement, but it was focusing on what can I do? I can control my attitude. You can always control your attitude. You can always control the actions that you take. You get up every day, you choose if you're going to work out or not. You choose if you're going to watch your spending or if you're going to track your finances or your income or do a budget. You get to choose whether you do that or not. So if you're not doing those things, you got to take responsibility. You got to look in the mirror and say, the problem is the person in the mirror. The good news is that that's the same person that can help me by making better decisions. And it's really realizing, I'm reading a book that I should have read a long time ago, but it's called Principles by Ray Dalio. And he talks about that there's first order consequences, and then there's second order and third order. And most people focus on first order. So first order means like, what's the immediate thing that's going to happen? All right. So if I go to the gym and I push it, it's going to be hard. I'm going to get sore. So you know what? I'm not going to do it. Whereas successful people focus on second and third order consequences. They say, what's going to happen after that? What's going to happen after the soreness, after I get through being uncomfortable? What's going to happen is I'm going to, forget about all the physical benefits, but I'm just going to become more resilient. I'm going to be a more positive person. I'm going to be able to face challenges in a better way. Same thing with the pandemic. You could focus on the systems of your business because there's nothing stopping anybody from doing that. You could focus on your podcast. That's what you guys did, right? You can start a podcast, right?
We started, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an example of that. And now look how many people this podcast is helping. And I wouldn't be here meeting you guys on here. And who knows where this is going to go, all as a result of those actions you took when maybe you could have thrown up your hands and said, there's nothing we could do.
Yeah. Because you just watch Netflix like everyone else did.
Exactly.
Not everyone, but
yeah.
There's a few things you've said there, which is brilliant. This is really good actually, because we haven't really delved into this sort of stuff in any of the other podcasts. Really, we've kind of touched on it a bit with Harinder and stuff like that, a bit of the mindset stuff. But you just said something great there, which is something I heard ages ago, and it's been said a million times. But it's the pain of change has to be less than the pain of remaining the same. Is that the right way around? So you're like, if you stay where you are now, so when you were in debt and what have you, if you just stayed there, it was going to be painful, and it's going to be painful to change that, but which is worse. And it was going to be worse to stay where you were, right? So you had to do something about it. So that's like you say, you're at rock bottom and you can't get any worse. But the other thing is what you were saying about choosing your reaction is you can get people whose reaction to that will be like, yeah, but it's because I'm unlucky. It's because of the way I am. I'm just that person. And they can think all of that, but you're not. And people who kind of get into that position, there's a few ways to go, isn't there? Mm-hmm. And some people think it's just because it's them. And it's like, no, because lots of other people have been in this position and got out of it. So why can't you? And there's it's kind of like people are individuals and people are different and everything, but you can group people into certain places, and you're not necessarily that individual because someone just like you has got out of this place. So why can't you? So it's a great message to get across that, because lots of people think that the world is against them. And it's not. They're against themselves. And it's because they choose to think that. So I just think
that's that Covey word, isn't it? Responsibility, the ability to respond.
Yeah.
And you have that ability to respond how you wish. And it is difficult, and it requires quite a lot of mental discipline and Harinder was talking about it actually on the podcast that we had mid-September, which was sometimes so he used this example of being hit by a wave, and there was no way in which he could come at the wave with greater force. A man against the wave is who's going to win. So all he could do was relax, and his ability to respond to that stressful event, well, he trained himself to be able to do that. And I think it's the same with this. It is very empowering to know that that there are many ways of responding to any event, and they don't all have to be negative. You don't have to follow that route.
Here's a challenge for people if you're listening, and whether you're struggling with fitness, finances, or any other area. This has become so clear to me over time and going through different trials and working on different goals. Is it could be any area. It could be a lot of kids do this. Like, I'm just not good at math, right? So what does that do when you tell that to yourself? You tell yourself, I'm not good at math. I don't know if that's a good example, right? Or I have a sweet tooth, or I'm just not a gym person, or I don't like the numbers. I'm not a numbers person. Anything like that. You could choose the example. What is that going to do? All that's going to do is going to reinforce that belief and that identity that you're giving yourself, that's not you. And more importantly, that's going to lead to you not doing the actions that you need to do. Trust me when I tell you this, in almost any area, like, I had no advantage in terms of finances. I didn't learn anything. I hate to say this, but I didn't receive any positive financial education as a youngster. I had no financial background. I didn't know anything about it at all.
I don't think anyone. It's funny. I don't think anyone does. There isn't like a
pocket money.
There's lots of things like this within school and stuff like that. And obviously, it's a very difficult system because, there's that many people to teach in one go, and you can't teach everyone different, and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think like life skills aren't really taught, are they? That's the thing. Is that the parents' responsibility? I mean, that's a whole another thing to talk about.
Yeah.
But I learned a little bit about it because my parents didn't like being in debt. But we never had much money. But that was kind of that was not put on me, but I learned that by just watching how they did things. But obviously, you said you've never had that, so you managed to get yourself into that situation.
Yeah, exactly. And Paul asked, like, what was the difference for you? Like, how come you all or none? How come you didn't go to none? And part of it was this realization that I'm really trying to get across, is that once I realized that this happened to me in other areas too, which is what helped. I had this in jiu-jitsu when I started. I had it in school, same kind of pattern where I ended up doing poorly, and then I was able to turn things around. And I realized that the only difference was that I wasn't putting in the effort. I wasn't putting in the work. If you put in the effort and you put in the work in any of these areas for long enough, you are going to win. I remember when I wasn't a good student in high school. I was very mediocre. I got to college. I was behind the 8-ball. I wanted to get into physical therapy. I got into all the prerequisites, going through the science courses. And because I was a goof in high school, chasing girls and playing sports, I had to do the work. I had to go to extra help after school. I was there till 8 o'clock at night with a free tutor. I ended up becoming friends with this guy named Justin, who was really pivotal in my life, because he was like a really cool guy. He was an athlete. He was a Division I recruited football player. He was just, I just thought he was cool. And he was really smart, and he was going somewhere. He was dating a physician or a pre-med or a medical student. And we were in anatomy, which was hard, especially if you weren't a good student before. It's a lot of memorization and just a lot to it. Both got our grades back one day. It was just for a test, and he got like 92, and I got maybe like a 78 or an 82. And I was like pumped. I was like, yeah, I got, this is really hard. And I got a 78 or an 82. He gets a 92, and he looks at it, and he's no strong reaction, but he goes up to the professor, and he says, I just wanted to ask you, I saw on this, the one question that I got wrong, or maybe the two questions, I just not sure where I went wrong. Can you help me figure out where I went wrong? And something about that, it just hit me. I said, and you said, and Peter, you said how, we're all different, but we're all the same. And I agree with that, because that was the only difference between his grade and my grade, was that he was the type of guy that was going to do that, and I wasn't. And then once I realized that is the secret. The secret is the same thing with jiu-jitsu. Once I started staying longer, coming more often, writing notes, reflecting, my game just elevated completely. And that was the secret. That was it.
Yep.
Yeah. Some people choose not to.
That goes with the, is it the Pareto principle or whatever, the 20-80 rule, 80-20 rule?
Yep.
So 20% of your effort gives you 80% of your results and all of that sort of stuff. So that's someone focusing on the 8% that they didn't get. And
Yep.
it's like, what about the 92% that you did get? Focus on that and build upon that, and then you're gonna go far further, aren't you? That's brilliant.
I take it you didn't do all of this work on your own. You must have started seeking mentors, because I mean, I think, because one of the things that I notice is that, particularly in fitness, is probably quite common, where you probably found with people who eventually don't become clients, they just don't justify the cost of investing in themselves. And this week I've had a couple of people who decided against the programs that I run because of the expense of it. And I'm using the word expense for a very specific reason. And that's because I believe these people see themselves as an expense. What was your mindset, having lost so much money and having been in that position where you needed to dig yourself out of a very big hole, but also knowing that your past and your actions in the past, working with some of the best people who are very expensive, that you couldn't always buy your way out of something? What did you start thinking about when you were looking for mentors, and how to justify the expense of that?
Yeah, this is an awesome topic. I can't emphasize enough the importance of education, mentorship, coaching. It has been a tremendous part of my life, and it continues to be. And I'm pretty frugal, so I don't know if we'll get into that or not. We talked about before recording about laptops and stuff like that. But one area that I'm not shy in spending on is in coaching, mentoring, education. Because there's a quote. It's Charlie Tremendous Jones. He said, "In 5 years, you're going to be the same person, except for the books that you read and the people that you meet." And that's the thing. It's like, what you do now is going to build on the future. So there's I can't think of many things more important than that self-development. But back then, when things were so tight, I remember, just to give like the contrast, I remember it being like a big deal to buy a book. I would start off going to the library. I remember going to the library and renting a Zig Ziglar book. It was like To the Top or something. Forgot the title, and I remember just going to the library, just sitting there and reading it. And I remember this is embarrassing, but I remember going to Barnes and Noble, not buying books, but just standing there and like reading parts of books. Like that's like kind of, how tight things were. And then and I think that's just a good takeaway. So like, maybe you're listening and it's like, yeah, I don't have a ton of extra, but it's like, what can you do? So there's a few things you can do. One is you can do books for free, right? You can buy a book, right? It's not a big deal, $20, and it's probably the best $20 you could spend. So that's huge. But then also there's finding mentors that maybe don't cost, right? Maybe it's just someone who happens to be strong in an area. Maybe you have a friend who's really fit and they have some good habits that they can rub off on you. There's that, I'm sure we've all heard that quote, we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. I think there's something to that. Think about it. If you're listening, think about it. Maybe even write it down. Maybe right now, maybe pause and say, who are the 5 people I spend the most time with? Literally write them down, and then see, where are you? Pete's smiling, so I don't know.
I'm laughing at that because the being in this world that I spend the most time with, because I'm at home most of the day and I spend time with the guys who are training everything, is my dog, right? Little 2-year-old spaniel called Sid, and actually I live his lifestyle. It's brilliant. We go out walking and we just have fun. It's like
you go to the loo outside as well.
Yeah. I go for a poo in the garden and all that sort of stuff. But no. The reason why I'm laughing at that is because that is what I've wanted my lifestyle to. But that's why I got him, because my lifestyle was kind of like that anyway. So that's why I'm laughing, because it's kind of true. I never know whether to believe that quote or not. Yeah. But actually, it's a big influence on your life. It's a lot of time to spend with people. So and I just found that quite funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's not really so important if the quote is true, because you can argue it, and I don't know either, but I think there's something to it. And what I mean by that is, I just know from experience that when I've been around different people, they do rub off. We talk about that with our kids. We have 4 kids. So as they get older, we want to be intentional with who they're spending time with. Are they spending time with, people that are respectful? And because if not, if I put my 10-year-old around a whole bunch of kids that are disrespectful, then it's going to rub off. So we want to watch that for ourselves. But then Paul, just to go further on the education. So I went from, And I am proud of this. I'll be honest. I went from, struggling to buy a book for $15 to investing upwards of $10,000 on, an event. So that was the progression that I took on going through. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, the more I want people to take this, and use common sense. I'm not telling you to put, a mastermind on a high interest credit card. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. But the more money I've spent on education, self-development, coaching, mentorship, the more I've grown.
Yeah. It's I was going to say something there. What you were talking about friends, people who you spend time with. Dan John came over and did a workshop, and he did some stuff on like the 80-20 rule, actually, which we've all heard of, but it's quite, you can apply it to like loads of different things. And he was applying it to friendships. And he said, you've got friends who you put 20% of effort in, you get 80% out. Great friends, those. And if you can be one of those friends as well, like that's an easy friendship. Then you get the ones who you put like, you put 50% effort in, you get 50% out, and it's like, or 80% in, you get 80% out. It's like for like. That's family, because you have to. And like, you can't get rid of those ones because that's family. And then you've got the opposite way around where you put 80% in and get 20% out. And they're the people who like, you just end up being like, who phone you up and you don't answer and all that sort of stuff. So, that can be applied to anything.
So I mean, with obviously your wife was going through this as well. And is she part of your business? Were you working as a team?
Oh man. So that's an interesting point. So when I started the first brick and mortar, it was back in 2010. Things were so tight. It was really bootstrapped. I shared on another podcast. We had people bring their own equipment. That's how tight things were. And it was humble beginnings, and we needed help. I couldn't afford to hire anybody. And she did some administrative work. And to be perfectly candid, it didn't work out. We have marriage. I love my wife to death. But we just, at that point, it could have been a maturity issue. I don't know for sure, but it just wasn't a good fit. It turned out some time passed, she ended up increasing her hours a bit. And then as soon as we were able to replace her, we just found it was better for her to be at home, with managing the house, raising the kids, and just to pay for the work that she was doing. So that's kind of how that went.
Yeah. It's a tough balance. I mean, and it's the same with people's fitness journeys as well. It's like, it's not just you on your own. There's other people involved in some way.
Yes.
Whether they're in opposition or whether they're in as part of your team. I sit down with many people who have very, very unhealthy partners, and they're battling that. And it's the same, I suppose, with finances. People who have someone who's very frugal, someone who's a bit more free, let's put it, or and having different attitudes, different upbringings around these things. Some people have different attitudes around food. Some people have different attitudes around money, and it certainly provides conflict. And how you manage that. And does that mean you would talk a lot as a couple, or would you? Yeah.
Yep. This is an area I'm really passionate about. But real quick, a leadership lesson. I remember my wife would answer inquiries, people calling up about personal training, and she was behind the desk. She was talking to a prospective client, and we had like this, let's see, was it probably 5-foot wall, like in front of the desk, but like blocking the gym. It was really like just makeshift. And she's on the phone. She's talking to this prospective client. And I'm literally like diving over the 5-foot wall, and I'm like writing things on a piece of paper for her to say as she's talking to this person. And I realized later on that probably wasn't the best leadership approach. So I have to take some responsibility for how that didn't work out. But to answer your point, that's such a powerful thing when a couple or partners can get aligned on where they're going. So we do a thing called a vivid vision. It's if anybody wants to look it up or Google, it's Cameron Herold. And it's essentially just really dialing in the future together with your spouse. So doing things like that will help get you aligned. Lots of conversations. A lot of my coaching clients, that's a big issue. And the problem is, and I had this problem as well, is it's not really a partnership. It's more like a dictatorship. It's just like, hey, you need to stop spending your money because we have debt, and that doesn't work, right? Nobody wants to be spoken to like they're a little kid. Here's your allowance while I go and do whatever I want. You're not allowed to do this, but I can do this. I had no right telling my wife what to do when I'm spending hundreds of dollars in jiu-jitsu lessons that we couldn't afford. So there really does have to be some heart to hearts. And I'm a big believer in asking questions to understand each other. So if you're like that dominant personality, like I am, and maybe your spouse is not, don't take advantage of that. But you just understand where they're coming from. And it's like Stephen Covey, right? You have to understand before you can, move forward, before you can build trust. And it's asking questions, what do you want? What do you want our future to look like? And it could be long-term. Like, what would you want our retirement to look like? What's important to you? What do you think that we need to spend on upcoming things? So we do a monthly, we call it a family meeting. So every single month, there's a couple of parts to it, but there's actually more than finance. We talk about all the areas of life, but from a financial standpoint, we talk about a budget. So what's coming up, and we kind of plot it all out so we know what we're spending. And then at the end of the month, we do a closeout. So we talk about how did it go? What kind of adjustments do we need to make? And we do that every month. We've done that for the last like 11 years. And that's probably the biggest game changer. Haven't missed 1 month. I'm proud of that as well. It's not one single month. Sometimes we're way later than we'd like it to be, but we have not missed a month, and that's been huge for us. I know a lot of us, we treat some areas of our lives with such seriousness, like maybe business. We're Paul, you and I talk, right? You're doing your finances for your business. You're talking to your team. You're going over your KPIs. You're running through all the numbers. But then at home, we're not doing any of that. So what are we really saying by doing that? We're really saying that this is important, but this isn't. And I feel that way with personal life in general. Like I have today, I think, is it today? I know yesterday I had one. I can't keep track because we've got the 4 kids. But yesterday I had a date with my 6-year-old, and it was on my calendar. And it's the same thing. Why would I put an appointment with my admin on my calendar, but not an appointment with my daughter, who no offense to my admin, but she's not as important in my life as this other person. So that's like a big takeaway for, like, I know overused word, but to create some sense of balance.
We had I was about to talk about Fabio zoning, because you talked about not missing a opportunity once a month to go over finances and have that family meeting. And Fabio Zonin, who's one of the master instructors at Strong First, he does a lot of traveling, and he's an incredibly strong, fit individual, and he's in his 50s now. And he says, look, I plan ahead. I know exactly what I'm going to work out. I know what I'm going to be eating. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. And I am proud to say I've never missed a workout. I don't think he ever missed a workout. Is that correct, Peter?
Wow. He missed one it was August 1996 or something like
exactly
that.
That. But he's a strong guy. He's an excellent instructor. He's a very focused individual, and he has great zest for life. He's an incredibly interesting guy, and it's not like he's a monk or anything. It's just he's disciplined. Yeah. And it's difficult to be disciplined over a long period of time. So we know, I just did a little update on my Facebook group about what happens. What does training and fitness look after your initial 3 months? 3-month, 12-week program, 3-month membership, initial commitment, whatever. I talked about the fact that now I'm just working on my elbow lockout in the kettlebell jerk, because as soon as you start to get to a certain point, you start having to solve little problems to progress you. And it's difficult to maintain focus. So that discipline you've had to do the same meeting, maybe different times of the month, but still in there, is one of the reasons you've succeeded.
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to, just to give a little quick tip, trying to do your best to make it fun, because it's not fun for everybody. Usually there's one person who is a little more into it, and in that case, it's me. But this is actually made me laugh, because we've been doing this for 11 years now. And I think it's 11 years, maybe 10 years, 10 or 11 years, or 10 and a half years. And the other day, my wife said, we have to do October. And I said to her, I just looked at her, I said, wow. I said, is that the first time in 10 years that you initiated the schedule of it? because it's always me that says, we have to do this. And she said, no, I think there was like one other time. But so usually there's one person that's going to be a little more into it, and that's okay. As long as, they're both on board. Usually there's one that's a little more into the finer details. Like they're the ones that are maybe going to take care of a spreadsheet or something like that. But as long as you're doing it together, you're both a part of it. Same as a business, right? You have one person that's a little more detailed, so they take care of that, and that's fine.
It's got to be collaborative, surely, because if it's accusational, if it's a little witch hunt, no one's going to want to do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Trying to, maybe do it over a glass of wine. Maybe you do it over brunch, something like that. I think helps. Don't try your best not to. It was hard. I remember in the early days, it wasn't always fun. And I learned a lot since then. I would get very intense, and that kind of scared my wife, and I would be freaking out because, I can't, balance our account. It's off by 70 cents. And it's so important because, we have all this debt. So that's important, so yeah.
Well, at least you're not going to open up your door anymore to some massive tattooed geezer as well. I'm not sure how I'd react to that.
But once you paid off the debt, it's like someone who loses the £10 they said they would, and then they just kind of relax. You pay off the debt, then what? So
I have a client. Her name is Julianne. So shout out to Julianne if she's listening, or she's like a long distance coaching client, and it's kind of like lifestyle fitness. And she reminded me of this point where she's been working with me for, I think, 3 or 4 months, and she's crushed her goals. I'm like so impressed with her. She's doing everything. She's tracking everything on an accountability sheet. She's doing it at home with a young child. She's super busy. She's a college professor. And she said, the hardest part for me is that I reached my goal. Like she was so into working towards her goal, and now she's there, and she's like scared that she's not going to be able to stay, because now it's kind of boring. And so I think that the big takeaway is that we have to understand that everything that requires lots of work and time to be successful, which is everything, a marriage, a body, finances, a business, faith, any area of life, it's going to get a little bit boring, just because there's no way around it. Like you're just going to have to get up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and do your workout, and there's no way around that. So I think at one level we have to embrace that, and at the second level we do have to try our best to keep that variety. Like Paul, you mentioned you're working on your lockout. That's a good example, because it's just something different that you're working on, and I think that's important. So with finances, one of the principles that I like to teach is just constantly learning about money, because it's like fitness, another similarity in that it's not rocket science, right? You eat a little bit less, you move a little bit more, you challenge your muscles more than they're used to, and you're probably going to, do okay. You make money, you spend less than you make, you save the difference, you're probably going to do okay. Same idea, but like with both, there's always deeper levels, more to learn, more to reinforce. So I believe that we should all do that, because these are important areas. Even if you're not a finance coach, you should still be learning more over time. And so I think if you do both of those things, you'll do okay. But back to what happened with us was I experienced that. And it's one of my regrets, is that we got so focused. And this is the idea. I actually wrote this down because before you made me think of it, I didn't get to it. But it's like the power of that transformation is so worth it. So if you're listening to this, maybe it sounds overwhelming. Like, I don't want to do all that work. It's too painful. I'd rather just sit here in my pain. Trust me when I tell you it is worth it, because I can't think of many things better than experiencing that positive result, not because of the thing, not because of the weight loss, not because of the getting out of debt, not because of the better marriage, but because of the person you become by doing that. You are becoming a better person as you move through these stages. So that for just that reason alone, it's worth, from somebody who's been there, it is worth it. I am so much better off than if I hadn't taken those steps, not because of the money, but because of who I've become. But I got too tied to the goal or the end result, going through that debt. I got so focused. It's like all I thought about, all we talked about. So then we got to that last payment. The last payment, I looked it up recently. It was a huge amount. Like that last payment was like, I'm just guessing, but like $16,000 or something I had to pay off for that last payment. And it was so weird because I wrote that check, I sent it off, and I felt like I won the Super Bowl or something, but it kind of lasted like 30 seconds. We've been on this 5-year journey, and we paid off all this debt. And I looked around and I'm like, where are the balloons and, the music? And, it's just like, that's it. Like, we still have the same like problems. We still have, maybe we're struggling in other areas, and life is still good, but it's not always great. So that was something that I had to learn the hard way. If I could go back, I would have been more mindful of that, which I'm trying to do now. It's like, because now I have new targets, and it's not about the target. The target is good, but it's about the process. And we get into this thing like, I'll be happy when I get out of debt. I'll be happy when I become a millionaire. I'll be happy when I have this level of my business. And those things aren't true. Those things don't create happiness. You find fulfillment in working towards a worthy cause, as Earl Nightingale said, and as you have relationships that are really meaningful. I think that those are some of the bigger keys. But from a practical standpoint, our next step was to start just moving forward in our financial journey. So that turned into investing, saving, investing. We built up significant cushions, both on the personal side and the business side, which is I don't know if we have time for that, but that's a big takeaway from the pandemic, right? Having those reserves really make a difference in your stress level.
Yeah. So I mean, while you were talking, it reminded me of a quote we had. We quote Dan John all the time, mainly because he's got such pithy quotes. But it's like the plan's going to be working so well, you'll stop doing it. I think is the thing, and so many people. I mean, like I do this 12-week program, and we have a photo shoot at the end. And like you said, with the balloons and stuff like that, there's this big photo shoot, and people feel like $1 million. They look amazing. There's a photographer there. There's a great atmosphere. There's music playing. Everyone's working out together. They're getting themselves ready for this, and it's boom, it's explosive kind of thing. And then we wake up on the Monday, and it's like, okay, there's no cameras. There's no, I haven't got the training plan. Unless they put something in place and a long-term plan, reality sits in very quickly. And what I've noticed with a lot of those clients, well, I hope, probably about 80% of the clients who went on the program, it was so important that they were just booking their classes in straight away for the next week, giving themselves a couple of days off just for the body to recover, but to get back the habit and not lose the habit, because it's quite easy to stop doing it. It's like, I've achieved that result. I don't know. I don't need to invest in growing my wealth. I don't need to, because I paid off all my debts. I can just, I survived on paying off. I've got a few extra quid now. I can keep going. I can spend a little bit more money on myself now. And it's very different to start thinking about investing into the future.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. The whole, because I'm very goal oriented myself, but like the whole goals versus habits idea. There's one school of thought that says, it's all about setting those concrete, measurable goals. But then the downside to that is that becomes the thing where you kind of lose your focus when that happens. And then there's the other side that says, just focus on habits. If you just work out every day, plan your meals, eat healthy, if you just spend less than you make, if you invest the difference, you're going to end up in a good spot. Which is better? I think there's, I think it's just being aware and being intentional. I can't give up setting goals, but I think there is a danger when you're only focused on the goal.
We've spoken about that before, about especially when you're starting out in anything, is people think, right, I need a goal. I'm going to set my goal. So the goal might be to lose weight or make $1,000 quid or $1,000 or $100,000 whatever it is.
Yeah.
But those aren't goals. Other the goal is like, well, what does that give you? What does it do for you? What does it change within you, basically? That's the way we were kind of looking at it. So when you're starting out in anything and people have these lofty goals, then it becomes very daunting for them, and they haven't even learned the process yet. So like you were saying, and it sits somewhere in between the two of forming the habits and then having the goal, and then you can start to expand it or progress your goals, can't you, and push them further. And it's the whole kind of comfort zone thing everyone talks about, but moving within your comfort zone but expanding the edge of it without actually not necessarily going outside it where it could be horrible and it might send you straight back in, but just keep edging it out and edging it out and edging it out. And then, if things become easier, like you said, you become a more resilient person, things become easier. And then you can deal with bigger situations and harder situations, I suppose. So,
well, it's like COVID was one of those situations when we were talking on Tuesday, one of the big things I'm lacking clarity on is is what do I want for my business in the next, COVID was such a stress for everyone that you go into a siege mentality and you go into survival mode. And I was lucky enough to go into COVID strong, to come out the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're kind of mentally exhausted from it. And sometimes anything that's worthwhile, any achievement is quite mentally exhausting. I mean, what are you doing to provide clarity? Because some of these things you've converted to habits. So, you've got the discipline around that monthly meeting. You've got discipline probably about the way you address your accounts on a monthly basis. But what is your own personal wellness strategy that keeps you sharp and stops you burning out and keeps the clarity of focus?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. It's having like these sort of like rules in my own life of, start time, stop time, because I know there's people that say, oh, if you love what you do, you'll never get burnt out. I mean, I think you need room for, yeah.
That was a laugh.
Yeah. You need room for all the areas. Here's an exercise that I'll share that I do and I've done, and I think other people can do. Is that, just kind of make a list, because we're all different. This like Peter said, we're all different. We're all the same. But take a list out and write down the things that make you feel creative. These are the things that kind of just they just make you feel like you have that space, like you have that margin, the things that, that give you some joy, and they're all different. Maybe for Peter, it's spending time with Sid. Maybe for me, it's, taking my daughter to the park, or maybe it's, going for a run for some people. Maybe it's reading 10 pages. Maybe it's, doing listening to music or looking at pictures. That's a good one. I do that sometimes. Like, if I'm feeling stressed, I just look at pictures of the people I love, and it just makes me feel like warm and fuzzy, which I need because I'm stressed out. So I need to get my mind off of it. I am, I'm a person of faith. So I'll do prayer or reading or just like solitude. So those things go a long way. So there's a big answer there, but it's a combination of all those things. But I think having some kind of rules of like, hey, these are the things I do. Like morning routines are huge. So, getting up, not being distracted by the phone, not putting the phone on first thing, shutting it off at night, and, having that routine. Maybe it's some quiet time. Maybe it's some movement. Maybe it's some time with somebody that you love. And same thing in the evening, shutting it down, having a little bit of a nighttime routine. So I'll drink a cup of tea with my wife and we'll chat about our day. And it's just kind of, a nice way to end the day. So that helps. We do a Sabbath. So for 24 hours every week, we don't do any work, paid or non-paid. So I won't do housework. We won't do bills. We won't do, work for the business. So that helps a lot, because then when that period ends, I'm kind of like raring to go. So things like that. And then, so there's rhythms. I guess that's the best answer. There's daily rhythms. So daily rhythms might include, some movement, some reading, time with people, downtime. It's fine. Have some time that's not scheduled. That's great. And then do what you want. I have a list. It's upstairs, but I have a list. It's just on a card like this. And it's a list of the things that I mentioned before. So sometimes I'll just have blocks of time and I'll do one of those things. Maybe it's looking at pictures for a few minutes. Maybe it's listening to a song, and I'll just do one of those. Like, it's like a mini vacation, like in the middle of the day. So those daily rhythms. And then there's weekly, which I talked about, the Sabbath. And then there's monthly, quarterly, annually. It's, getting some time away, whether it's a staycation or going away. Maybe it's a day in the woods by yourself to just spend some time with things that are creative. Maybe it's content. Maybe it's just time with a journal, time with a book, that kind of stuff. So I try to do all those things. I'm not perfect. And COVID definitely presented a challenge. Like, I was doing one day per quarter. That was what I just mentioned, like kind of away in the woods or something like that. I was doing that for a while, for pretty consistently for a couple of years. And then, I think this past year I did, maybe instead of doing it once a quarter, I think I did it twice. So I missed one or two quarters, and, that's going to happen. That's something I want to share, because I think the danger sometimes is in people listening to podcasts is that you start feeling like like, oh man, that sounds like so much. I can't do that. So I want to just caution everybody that, I'm just telling you the good stuff, right? There are days where I'm not feeling it. There are days where I get discouraged. There are days where I miss my habits. There are days. So we all have those. Anybody that looks like they have things together, it's all BS, right? Because we're all human. Life is messy. We have problems in our relationships. We have problems in our business. I tell Paul all the time, I have the clients that quit. I have the staff members that quit. Nobody's immune to that. And if anybody's telling you that otherwise, I would run the other way, because they're either lying or they don't know reality. So there's going to be ups and downs. We've had tons of ups and downs throughout those years. And I think one powerful point is, if you could zoom out, and I shared this with you, Paul, that if you could zoom out and look at things from a higher perspective, that's when you'll really see what's happening. It's like that quote. I'm sure you've heard it. And if you haven't, I'll be surprised. Is that we overestimate what we could do in 1 year, but we underestimate what we could do in 5 or 10 years. And that could not be truer. So over the course of 5 years, we have $130,000 of debt. But if you looked at any like small period within that time, if you looked at it 1 month, maybe we didn't make any progress, or there was months where we lost progress because we had an emergency that we had to spend money on. So if I would have just looked at that and said, this isn't working, that would have been a very bad decision. And it's the same thing with business. I talk to a lot of people in consulting and even mentors, and there's ups and downs. Not every year is you have these outliers, which I think are the most dangerous things to follow, because most of us aren't outliers. So we look at somebody like, this is, I'll give a little book reference. It's called The Psychology of Money. And he talks about, you look at somebody like Bill Gates, and it's like, the worst thing you could do is try to compare yourself to somebody like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or any of these guys, because they are outliers. What you want to do is you want to look at what the average person is doing to find success. And they're doing these small habits. Somebody like Bill Gates, I didn't know this. I don't know if you guys knew this, but this shocked me. We could talk about how great he is and how talented he is, and that's all true. But he went to one of the only high schools in the country. I think it was only like 3 high schools in the country at the time that had a computer. And he says himself that if I had gone to a different high school, Microsoft would not be. So that's like so powerful if you think about that. So there's, for lack of a better word, there's luck in all these scenarios. We don't get to choose, our family of origin. We don't get to choose, where we live. We don't get to choose the opportunities that we have. All we can do is focus on the things we can control, and develop good habits over time that we know are proven, and chances of success are higher. But when we start saying, I'm going to do this crazy investment because this other that's where it can be dangerous.
Yeah. But I mean, Bitcoin's a big one with that at the minute. Loads of people are talking about that and like, what am I going to do with that? And I'm like, do you need more money? Well, not really. Well, okay. It's up to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't need any more, why would you bother? Because you could lose everything. So
whenever I hear the word Bitcoin, I just think of Pac-Man. I don't know why. It just gives me that. It's the visualization I have, that it's just like little coins like that. I don't know.
Yeah. You have nightmares about Pac-Man when you.
I'm never very good at it. I used to like Bubble Bobble, which is much. That was on the Amiga, so that's a blast of the past for anyone over the age of.
The Amiga, which the Australian soap opera Neighbours, the whole of Sands Resort that Paul Robinson ran, the whole thing, massive big hotel complex, was run from an Amiga 500.
There we go. That's a fact.
Just the one.
Wow. Yeah, I like those old school games. New Zealand. Anyway, we could get into. I mean, last time we had Paul McElroy on, he was talking about Roy Castle. So we need to go away from the 80s references and get back on the subject. But look, I think it's probably a good time to wrap up. I mean,
we've been good about an hour.
We've kind of delved into some great subjects here, and I mean, I know that we talked about obviously some very specific financial kind of circumstances, but as you can see, with a lot of these things, the success leaves trails, and there are commonalities across the board in any pursuit that you want to do. Finding success in anything is going to require similar kind of mindset, with financial success, physical success, and professional success. I mean, most of my clients have, I mean, and I've probably said this on the podcast numerous times, I certainly say it to my clients frequently, is that they're successful people. I work with lawyers, I work with people who run major corporations, I have people who are doctors, nurses, you know, they've all attained success. And for whatever reason, they are not employing the same skill sets that they had that got them to the level they're at in terms of their professional, similar skills that they're using with their families as well, because they all seem to have good families. So, but they're just not doing it with their health. So no wonder they're not succeeding, because they're not pulling upon the biggest resource that they have, which is themselves. And I think you, by the sound of it, quite early on, you realized that you could drive this. You didn't have to rely on someone else to do it. Obviously, someone else was telling you needed to do it, and he was about 6'5" with tattoos on his face.
Very persuasive.
He's very persuasive, and maybe I might use him with my clients in just standing in the corner of the studio, just saying, well, "Come on, let's squat a bit deeper." Yeah,
it's a good story, but he was like such a nice guy too. After I was like almost starting to cry. He's like, he must have been really well trained, because he had empathy. He was like giving me these like sad faces. He's like, and he was genuine. Like he didn't enjoy it. He said, yeah. I said, I'm really sorry. I said, I'll give you the money right now. Just unhook the car. He's like, I wish I could. I can't. It's just this is how it works. And he was actually a nice guy.
I'd like to know his backstory, how he ended up. Maybe he was a social worker that kind of fell on hard times and needed to find extra money. You know, there's a backstory to him, and and he's like, I hate doing this. I had to break his arms, and I was crying while I was doing it. But anyway, cool, right? So, well, thank you very much, Blly. I mean, how can so if someone's interested in what you do, whether it's training in your area, or obviously someone who wants some financial advice, whether there's we have some fitness professionals that do listen to this podcast, but obviously it's aimed at the general population. So how can people find out more about what you do?
I'll give you a couple, not to just confuse or overwhelm people. I can give you guys some links if you want to throw them in the show notes, but you can find me on social media. It's under William Hofacker. So you can find me there. Facebook Messenger would be fine, or something like that. And then if you're interested in the sort of like the self-development slash financial side, check out the podcast. It's the Your Fitness Money Coach podcast. And the downside to that is it's kind of like passive, right? Like just like you guys, right? People are listening. We don't really know exactly who's listening. So that'd be great, but I'd also love to connect with you. So feel free to, to just reach out, send me a message. I would love to know, especially if you've found me here and now you're going to check out that content. I'd just love to be able to support you. So I appreciate you guys having me on. You guys were a lot of fun. It was a fun conversation.
Yeah, no, so it's great. It's just great to, I mean, one of the reasons we started this podcast back during the lockdowns that we had in the UK was that, we wanted to connect with people. And as you say, part of the joys of life is not just about working hard. It is about meeting interesting people and expanding your thinking. And there's a great opportunity for us to expand our kind of network of influence. So Peter, anything you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Man, honestly, loads. Like there's loads of tangents we could have gone off on there. That's like a whole day's worth of conversation, isn't it? That we've been down, and it could have gone this way, could have gone that way. There's a couple of things. So the thing about spending time with the people who you spend time with and all that, that's what Paul's just been saying. That's one of the reasons we do this podcast, because like we get to talk to some great people, people who really know what they're talking about, people who've been there and done it. And this gets us to spend time with guys like you, which is great, because then we learn from it. That's why we do it, because we're just, we want to learn, which is the whole thing about like keeping the journey going and keeping learning and stuff like that. But you've also just said it was great fun, which it is. And that's one of the things that I wanted to just touch on right at the end when you're talking about, because I thought this as well. And when you're talking about schedule and stuff and having your life in this order and this and this, and you have your family meeting and you have this, and people are like, bloody hell, that's work. And it's like, yeah, you still do stuff for fun as well. You've got to leave room in that, because like otherwise, because I know I got into my mid-30s towards my 40s, and I was like, I don't do anything for fun anymore. I don't do anything. So you've got to put that in your life as well, which is like, I find this thing fun, so this is what I do for fun anyway. But yeah, like, you know, like you were saying, like reading or whatever, just make sure you fit that in your life as well, because otherwise you'll end up 10 years down the line thinking like everything's regimented and all that and what's happened. So yeah, but thanks.
Yeah. Like you say, time's going to be passing anyway, isn't it? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might as well have fun.
Yeah, and Paul mentioned about, he's asking about self-care, and that's like the big thing for me is like jujitsu, right? Like it's just a way for me to get away from everything else, and I have to worry about this, 250-pound guy that's trying to smash me. It's fun, believe it or not, and it just gets my mind completely off of all the other stuff that can be stressful, and that I think allows me to come with a clearer mind when I am ready to get back to it.
So
yeah,
you're
not sitting with that guy on you thinking like, what am I going to have for dinner tonight?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I like the fact there's something about people who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when they refer to self-care as being smashed into a pole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I don't want the takeaway to be missed. So that could be anything, right? Like, so what is that thing for you that would get your mind off of all of the other life stresses? Because like Peter said, part of life is meant to be enjoyed. So if all you're doing is working and focusing on all this stuff, that's great, but you're missing a big piece of that. So what are those things? Maybe you like to paint or play an instrument, whatever it is, make some time to do that, because you're going to have a better life.
I mean, you should have gone up to this big guy saying, do you know I do jiu-jitsu?
Exactly.
You don't want to mess with me. It's not gonna... But anyway, okay. Thanks for coming on, Blly.
Absolutely, guys.
So for the listeners, at the end of this podcast, we always ask you to subscribe and like our podcast, whether it's joining the Facebook group that we have, the Health Oddity Facebook group, or importantly, just leave us a review in iTunes. Sometimes we can't see if they've been left. I hope that you are doing that, but certainly subscribe so you get this every week. What we are noticing, and as Peter referred to right at the beginning of this podcast, we are growing our listener numbers, and it's coming on really nicely. We're hitting some milestones. But some of that's going to come down to the fact that as soon as we release a new episode, we can see that people are listening to it straight away. So that's probably because they're subscribed. So if you're not subscribed, you're going to miss out on being the first people to listen to these things, comment on it, and get all the value that the podcast can give you. So once again, thanks a lot for coming in, Blly. Peter, good to see you again. And James will be back on next week, and we'll see you soon.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.